The icy water of Pine Creek slapped against Bethany Adams' face as she tumbled beneath the rushing current, her lungs screaming for air. She had only meant to retrieve the handkerchief that had blown from her grasp, never expecting the bank to give way beneath her feet. The spring melt had made the creek treacherous, and as she clawed toward what she hoped was the surface, Bethany wondered if this was how her story would end 23 years old and drowned in a backwater stream in Wyoming Territory, 1876. Just as darkness threatened to claim her, strong hands seized her dress and yanked her upward. She broke the surface with a desperate gasp, water streaming from her nose and mouth as she was dragged unceremoniously to the muddy bank. "Breathe, miss." "That's it, just breathe," a deep voice urged as she coughed and sputtered. When Bethany finally managed to focus her vision, she found herself staring into the most striking blue eyes she'd ever seen, set in a sun-weathered face beneath a dripping cowboy hat. Her rescuer knelt beside her, his expression a mixture of concern and relief. "Thank you," she wheezed, still fighting for proper breath. "Yates Eldridge," he introduced himself with a nod. "And you might be the first lady I've fished out of Pine Creek this season." Despite her sodden state, Bethany felt a smile tug at her lips. "Bethany Adams, first and hopefully last time I take an unplanned swim." Yates helped her to her feet, and Bethany became acutely aware of her drenched dress clinging to her form. She crossed her arms over her chest, shivering in the spring breeze. Without a word, Yates shrugged out of his leather coat and draped it around her shoulders. The warmth and weight of it was immediately comforting, carrying the scent of horses, tobacco, and something distinctly masculine. "What brings a lady like yourself out to these parts alone?" he asked, keeping a steadying hand on her elbow as they moved away from the treacherous bank. "I'm the new schoolteacher for Pinewood," Bethany replied, wringing water from her skirts. "I was supposed to meet someone from town, but it appears they're late." Yates nodded thoughtfully, his gaze scanning the horizon. "That'd be old Bill Thompson, I reckon. His wagon threw a wheel yesterday. Town's still 3 miles yonder." He gestured toward the distant cluster of buildings. "I can take you if you'd like." Bethany hesitated, weighing her limited options. Being alone with a strange man wasn't proper, but neither was freezing to death beside a creek. "I would appreciate that, Mr. Eldridge. Just Yates, madam." "Nobody's called me mister since I left Boston 5 years ago." "You're from Boston." Bethany couldn't hide her surprise. Despite his rough appearance and frontier manner, there was something in his speech that hinted at education. A shadow crossed his face. That was another life. He whistled, and a magnificent chestnut gelding trotted toward them from where it had been grazing. "This here's Rusty. He's gentle as they come." The ride into Pinewood was awkward but mercifully brief. Bethany sat side saddle in front of Yates, his arms around her to hold the reins, their bodies pressed together in a way that would have scandalized proper society. But Bethany found herself more concerned with the warmth radiating from his chest than with propriety. Pinewood wasn't much to look at a main street with the requisite general store, saloon, and assorted businesses, with homes scattered around the perimeter. Folks stopped to stare as Yates rode in with the bedraggled newcomer. "That's our new schoolmarm," she heard someone mutter. "Looks like she took a bath with her clothes on," another voice commented, followed by chuckles. Bethany felt her cheeks burn. This wasn't the dignified arrival she had planned. Yates guided Rusty directly to a modest 2-story building with a hand-painted sign that read Pinewood Hotel and Boarding House. "Mrs. Jenkins runs this place," he explained as he helped her down. "She's stern but fair. Tell her what happened and she'll get you sorted." Bethany slipped off his coat and handed it back with genuine gratitude. "Thank you, Yates. I'm in your debt." He tipped his hat, water still dripping from the brim. "No debt between neighbors, Miss Adams. I reckon we'll be seeing each other around town." As he turned to leave, Bethany called after him. "How did you happen to be at the creek at just the right moment?" Yates looked back, a small smile playing at his lips. "Just luck, I suppose, or maybe Providence." With that, he mounted Rusty and rode away. leaving Bethany with the distinct impression that her life in Pinewood would be anything but dull. Mrs. Jenkins was indeed stern, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, and her mouth set in a permanent line of disapproval. But when Bethany explained her mishap, the older woman's expression softened marginally. "Land's sakes, child, you could have drowned. Good thing Yates was there." She ushered Bethany upstairs to a small but clean room. "Get those wet things off before you catch your death." "I'll bring up some hot water and tea." Later, wrapped in a borrowed robe with her hair hanging in damp waves down her back, Bethany sat by the window watching the town settle into evening. Mrs. Jenkins had provided not only tea but a hearty stew and fresh bread, along with town gossip served in generous portions. Yates Eldridge, Mrs. Jenkins had said thoughtfully when Bethany mentioned him. "Showed up about 3 years back, keeps to himself mostly, but he's a fair hand with horses. Has a small spread about 2 miles out of town. People respect him, though some find him standoffish." "He mentioned Boston," Bethany prompted. Mrs. Jenkins shrugged. "If he did, that's more than he's told most. Man's entitled to his privacy." Now, as lamps were lit in windows across Pinewood, Bethany found her thoughts drifting back to those intense blue eyes and the strong arms that had pulled her from the water. She chided herself for such fanciful thinking. She had come here to teach, to make something of herself away from the whispers and pitying glances that had followed her back home. "You'll never have children of your own," the doctor in Philadelphia had told her after her fever. "The illness has left you barren." At 23, Bethany had watched her future crumble. No husband would want a wife who couldn't give him children. Even Robert, her fiancé of 2 years, had broken their engagement when he learned the truth. "I need sons to carry on the family name," he'd said, as if that justified everything. So she had come west, where perhaps a spinster schoolteacher would be judged on her merits rather than her womb. And now here she was, in a town too small to appear on most maps, with dripping undergarments hung before the fire and the memory of a cowboy's smile warming her more than it should. Tomorrow she would meet the town council and see the schoolhouse. Tomorrow her real work would begin. But tonight, just for a moment, she allowed herself to wonder if fate had more in store for her than she had dared to hope. The schoolhouse was a simple one-room building at the edge of town, with rows of rough-hewn benches and a pot-bellied stove in the corner. Mayor Hollister, a portly man with mutton-chop whiskers, showed her around with obvious pride. 28 students enrolled, ages 6 to 16, he explained, gesturing to the ledger on the teacher's desk. "Previous schoolmaster left us rather abruptly, found gold fever more appealing than teaching arithmetic, I'm afraid. Was that why there was such a delay in my quarters being ready?" Bethany asked, thinking of the small cabin behind the schoolhouse that was still being prepared. The mayor tugged at his collar. "Partially. We've also had some trouble with certain elements. Nothing for you to worry about." Bethany raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Hollister, if I'm to live alone on the edge of town, I think I should know what elements might be troubling Pinewood," he sighed. "Just some cattle rustlers operating in the area. They've hit a few of the outlying ranches. Sheriff Donovan has it well in hand." Bethany wasn't entirely convinced, but she nodded. "When can I expect to move into my quarters?" "Should be ready by week's end. Until then, Mrs. Jenkins has agreed to board you." The first day of school arrived with clear skies and Bethany's stomach in knots. She'd taught before, but never as the sole authority, never with such a wide range of ages. She stood at the door in her best blue dress, welcoming each child with a smile. By mid-morning, she had already separated 2 fighting boys, explained to a tearful 6-year-old that no, she couldn't go home yet, and discovered that the older students were woefully behind in their studies. "Who can tell me the capital of Wyoming Territory?" she asked the class. Silence greeted her. "Cheyenne," she supplied. "And who was the first president of our United States?" A tentative hand rose. "George Washington," ventured a freckle-faced girl of about 12. "Very good, Sarah," Bethany smiled encouragingly. "My pa says school's a waste of time," announced a sullen boy of perhaps 14 from the back row. Says I'd be better off learning to work cattle. Bethany met his defiant gaze. And what's your name? Thomas Mitchell. Well, Thomas, I respect your father's opinion. Ranching is honest, important work. But tell me, when your father sells his cattle, does he count the money himself or trust the buyer to tell him what's owed? Thomas shifted uncomfortably. He counts it himself, of course. And if he wants to purchase new land, does he read the contract or just sign wherever he's told? The boy's ears reddened. He reads it. Bethany nodded. That's why you're here. So whether you become a rancher, a shopkeeper, or even president, you'll never be at another man's mercy because you lack knowledge. The afternoon went more smoothly. As the children filed out at day's end, Bethany sank into her chair, exhausted but satisfied. She was gathering her things when a shadow fell across the doorway. Heard you made quite an impression, Yates said, leaning against the jamb. Bethany smiled despite her fatigue. I'm not sure if it was good or bad, but it was certainly an impression. He entered, hat in hand, looking somewhat out of place among the small desks. Mrs. Jenkins asked me to escort you back to town, said she needed your opinion on curtains for your cabin. That's very kind of you both, Bethany said, collecting her books, but I can manage the walk myself. Yates didn't move from the doorway. Ordinarily, I'd agree, but with those rustlers still at large, folks are being cautious. The mayor mentioned them. Are they really so dangerous? His expression darkened. They shot a ranch hand who stumbled upon them last month. Man lived, but he'll never use his right arm again. Bethany swallowed hard. I see. Then I appreciate the escort. They walked in companionable silence for a few minutes before Yates spoke again. How'd you come to teaching out here? Most educated women stay east. Most, but not all, Bethany replied, carefully stepping around a muddy patch. I wanted a fresh start, running from something or toward something. The question was too perceptive by half. Perhaps a bit of both, she admitted. And you, what brought you from Boston to Wyoming? His jaw tightened. Like you said, a fresh start. They had reached the boarding house and Bethany paused at the bottom step. Thank you for the escort, Yates. He nodded, then surprised her. I'm heading to the social on Saturday. Town does one every month. Would you allow me to escort you there as well? Bethany felt a flutter in her chest that had no business being there. I would like that. His smile transformed his entire face, softening the hard edges and bringing a warmth to those blue eyes. I'll call for you at 6. As he walked away, Bethany reminded herself sternly that she wasn't here for romance. A barren woman had no business encouraging a man's attentions. But for the first time since the doctor's devastating pronouncement, she found herself wondering if there might be more to life than what she'd been told could never be. The social was held in the town hall, a building that doubled as church on Sundays. Paper lanterns cast a warm glow over trestle tables laden with food, and someone had cleared a space for dancing. Bethany wore her best dress, a deep green that brought out the gold flecks in her brown eyes, and had spent an embarrassing amount of time arranging her honey-colored hair. When Yates arrived to escort her, he'd cleaned up remarkably well. His black trousers and crisp white shirt were a stark contrast to his usual trail-worn appearance, though he still wore his worn boots. You look beautiful, he said simply, and the sincerity in his voice made Bethany blush. Thank you. You're quite presentable yourself. The evening was a whirlwind of introductions, as it seemed the entire town had turned out to meet the new schoolteacher. Bethany found herself trying to memorize dozens of names and faces while fielding questions about her teaching methods and background. You're from Philadelphia? Mrs. Mitchell, Thomas's mother, asked over punch. How exotic, Bethany laughed. Hardly exotic, but yes, I grew up there. And no husband? The question came from Mrs. Peterson, whose twin girls were in Bethany's class. A pretty thing like you? No, Bethany said, maintaining her smile with effort. Teaching is my calling. For now, perhaps, Mrs. Peterson said with a knowing look at Yates, who was across the room talking with some of the ranchers. As if sensing her discomfort, Yates appeared at her side. Miss Adams, I believe you promised me a dance. She hadn't, but she gratefully took his offered arm. Indeed I did. The fiddler struck up a lively reel, and Bethany found herself being expertly guided through the steps. Yates moved with a natural grace that belied his rugged exterior. "You dance very well for a cowboy," she commented as they circled each other. "My mother insisted on dancing lessons," he replied, his hand warm at her waist. "Said no son of hers would stomp around a ballroom like a buffalo." The mental image made Bethany laugh. "I'm trying to picture you in a Boston ballroom." "It wasn't pretty," he assured her with a grin. "I much prefer this." As they moved through the figures of the dance, Bethany became aware of whispers and glances. "I think we're causing a stir," she murmured. Yates's eyes twinkled. "Small towns run on gossip. By tomorrow we'll be engaged." "Oh dear," Bethany felt her cheeks heat. "That would be most improper." "Scandalous," he agreed solemnly, but there was something in his gaze that made her heart skip. Later, as they walked back to the boarding house under a canopy of stars, Yates offered her his arm. "Did you enjoy yourself?" "Very much," Bethany admitted. "Though I suspect I'll be fielding questions about that Eldridge fellow for days to come." "And what will you tell them?" he asked, his voice light but his eyes serious. Bethany considered. "That you're a gentleman who knows how to rescue drowning schoolteachers and dance a proper reel." They had reached the boarding house, and Yates turned to face her on the porch. The lamplight from inside cast half his face in shadow. "I'd like to call on you properly, Bethany, if you're amenable." The simple request sent her pulse racing. "Yates, you should know something about me." His brow furrowed at her sudden seriousness. "What is it?" The words stuck in her throat. How did one tell a potential suitor that she could never give him children, that she was damaged goods? But honesty demanded she speak now before anything more developed between them. "I cannot have children," she said quietly, looking down at her gloved hands. "An illness when I was 20 left me barren. If you're looking to start a family someday, I'm not. I couldn't." Yates was silent for a long moment, and Bethany braced herself for his polite withdrawal. Instead, he gently lifted her chin until she met his gaze. "Thank you for telling me. That changes nothing about my request." Bethany blinked, sure she'd misheard. "But surely I'm not courting you for what you might give me in the future, Bethany. I'm interested in who you are now, the woman who faces down reluctant students and dances like she was born to it." Tears pricked at Bethany's eyes. "Most men want sons." "I'm not most men," Yates said simply. "Now may I call on you?" A weight Bethany hadn't realized she was carrying seemed to lift from her shoulders. "Yes, you may." His smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "Good night then, Miss Adams. Sleep well." He waited until she was safely inside before turning away, and Bethany watched from the window as he walked back toward town, his stride easy and confident under the Wyoming stars. The weeks that followed took on a rhythm. Bethany taught during the day, gradually winning over even the most reluctant students. In the evenings, she prepared lessons and graded papers in her newly finished cabin behind the schoolhouse. And several times a week, Yates would come calling. Sometimes they simply walked through town, exchanging observations about their days. Other times, he brought a picnic, and they rode out to a meadow where wildflowers painted the landscape in vibrant colors. He told her stories of growing up in Boston as the son of a shipping magnate, and she shared memories of Philadelphia and her 3 boisterous brothers. What Yates didn't share was what had driven him west, and Bethany didn't press. Everyone had their secrets, and she sensed that whatever his were, they still caused him pain. One evening in late May, they sat on her porch swing, watching fireflies rise from the grass. "Thomas Mitchell asked me about algebra today," Bethany said with quiet pride. "The same boy who told me school was useless 2 months ago." Yates smiled. "You've worked miracles with those kids, the whole town's talking about it." "Hardly miracles, just patience and perhaps a bit of stubbornness." "You underestimate yourself," Yates said, his hand finding hers on the swing between them. "You've got a gift for nurturing. Those children are flourishing under your care." The simple compliment touched Bethany deeply. "Thank you," she said softly. Yates seemed to hesitate, then spoke carefully. "Bethany, there's something I've been meaning to tell you about why I left Boston." She turned toward him, noting the tension in his jaw. "You don't have to, I want to," he interrupted gently. "I need to if what I feel for you is going where I hope it is." The implication made her breath catch, but she nodded for him to continue. "I was engaged once," Yates began, his gaze fixed on the darkening horizon, "to a woman named Catherine Winslow. Our families had been friends for generations, and the match was considered ideal in every way." He paused, and Bethany squeezed his hand encouragingly. "I thought I loved her," he continued, "and perhaps I did in the way a young man loves an idea, but 2 weeks before our wedding I found her in a compromising position with my closest friend." "Oh, Yates," Bethany breathed, "I'm so sorry." He shook his head. The betrayal hurt, but what came after was worse. Catherine's family insisted the wedding proceed regardless. My father agreed. It was all about business connections and social standing, you see. My feelings, Catherine's obvious lack of affection, none of that mattered. "What did you do?" A rueful smile touched his lips. "I caused a scandal. Publicly broke the engagement at her family's summer ball, then took my inheritance, the one my grandfather had left, with specific instructions that it couldn't be touched by my father, and headed west the next day." "Just like that?" Bethany couldn't hide her amazement. "Just like that," he confirmed. "Cut all ties. My father disowned me, of course, wrote that I was dead to him. And you've never regretted it?" Yates finally looked at her, his blue eyes intense in the fading light. "Not for a moment. I found freedom out here, found myself, and now—" He hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. Reaching into his pocket, he withdrew a small box. "Now I've found someone worth far more than all I left behind." Bethany's heart hammered against her ribs as Yates slipped from the swing to one knee before her. "Bethany Adams, I know we haven't known each other long, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, your strength, your kindness, your passion for teaching. I want to build a life with you if you'll have me." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold ring set with a small but brilliant diamond. "Will you marry me?" Tears blurred Bethany's vision. "Yates, are you certain?" "You know I can't. I've never been more certain," he said firmly. "I don't need sons to carry on a family name I've already abandoned. I just need you." Joy unlike anything she'd ever known surged through Bethany. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, I'll marry you." Yates slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to gather her in his arms. His kiss was tender at first, then deepened with a passion that left her breathless. When they finally parted, both a little dazed, Yates rested his forehead against hers. "I should go before Mrs. Jenkins comes out with her broom," he murmured. Bethany laughed. "Yes, I think my reputation has been compromised enough for one evening." He kissed her once more, quickly. "I'll speak to Reverend Taylor tomorrow. How soon can I make you Mrs. Eldridge?" "The school term ends in 3 weeks," Bethany said thoughtfully. "Would June 18th be acceptable?" "I'd marry you tomorrow if I could," Yates replied, his smile radiant in the gathering darkness. "But June 18th it is." As she watched him walk away, his step jaunty with happiness, Bethany touched the ring on her finger in wonder. Never had she imagined finding such acceptance, such love. Perhaps the doctor had been right about her physical limitations, but in every other way that mattered, her life was suddenly, gloriously full of possibility. News of their engagement spread through Pinewood like wildfire. Most reactions were congratulatory, though Bethany noticed a few disappointed looks from young women who had apparently harbored hopes regarding the handsome rancher. And there were, inevitably, whispers about the haste of the match. "Barely knows him," she overheard Mrs. Peterson saying to Mrs. Mitchell outside the general store. "Makes you wonder if there's a reason for the rush." The implication was clear, and Bethany felt a stab of bitter irony. If only they knew how impossible their insinuations were. Mrs. Jenkins, however, was unreservedly delighted. "I knew it from the moment he carried you in here half-drowned," she declared as she helped Bethany plan the modest wedding. "That man looked at you like you'd hung the moon." Preparations kept Bethany busy, but she couldn't help noticing that Yates seemed increasingly preoccupied as June progressed. He assured her everything was fine, yet sometimes she would catch him staring into the distance, his expression troubled. Is it second thoughts? She finally asked one evening as they sat on the porch of his small ranch house, discussing where they would live after the wedding. What? No, never, Yates took her hands in his. It's just, there's been more rustling activity. The ranchers are on edge. Sheriff Donovan thinks they might be planning something big before moving on to new territory. You're worried about your horses, Bethany guessed. Yates had been building a reputation for breeding and training quality stock. He nodded. They're my livelihood, our livelihood soon. His expression softened as he squeezed her hands. Don't worry, it's nothing that will interfere with our wedding. But 2 nights later, a pounding on her cabin door jolted Bethany from sleep. She wrapped a shawl around her nightdress and approached cautiously. Who is it? Sheriff Donovan, Miss Adams. Sorry to disturb you, but it's urgent. She opened the door to find the sheriff looking grim in the lantern light. Behind him, she could see flames illuminating the night sky. What's happened? She gasped. Fire at the Eldridge place, he said tersely. Yates asked me to tell you he's all right, but it's bad. Barn's gone, and they nearly got the house too. Bethany's hand flew to her throat. Rustlers? The sheriff nodded grimly. Looks that way, took his best breeding stock. Yates interrupted them and took a blow to the head for his trouble. I need to go to him, Bethany said, already turning to dress. That's why I'm here, madam. He's asking for you. The scene at Yates's ranch was chaotic. Men formed a bucket brigade from the well to douse lingering flames, while others comforted panicked horses that had escaped the inferno. The barn was reduced to smoldering timbers, and the acrid smell of burnt wood and flesh hung in the air. Bethany found Yates sitting on his porch steps, a bloody cloth pressed to his temple. His face was smudged with soot, his eyes haunted. Yates. She rushed to him, her heart constricting at the defeat in his posture. He looked up, relief washing over his features. Bethany, you shouldn't have come. Don't be ridiculous, she said, gently taking the cloth to examine his wound. A nasty gash ran along his hairline, but it had already stopped bleeding. What happened? I heard the horses around midnight, he explained wearily. Came out to find the barn already burning and 4 men loading my best stock into a makeshift corral. I managed to free most of them, but then someone hit me from behind. He gestured to his injury. When I came to, they were gone, along with Rusty and the 3 mares I was counting on for next year's breeding program. Bethany's heart sank. Those horses represented not just monetary value, but years of careful work. The sheriff will catch them, she said with more confidence than she felt. Yates gave a bitter laugh. They've been at it for months without so much as a clue to their identities. And now? He looked around at the destruction. I've got nothing left. The house survived, but everything else, feed, tack, tools, it's all gone. Bethany took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. You have me, she said firmly. We'll rebuild. For a moment she thought he might argue. Then something in his eyes shifted, a spark rekindling in the blue depths. He covered her hands with his own. Yes, we will. They stayed like that, drawing strength from each other, until the sheriff approached. Found something you might want to see, Donovan said, holding out a curved piece of metal. Was caught in one of your fence posts. Yates took it, examining the object carefully. A spur rowel, he said, custom made by the look of it. The sheriff nodded. Never seen one quite like it. Those star points are unusual 7 instead of the usual 6. A grim smile spread across Yates's face. I have. Belongs to a man named Lucas Hargrove. Used to work for the Barrett outfit before he got fired for stealing. You sure about that? Donovan asked. Positive. Man made a point of showing them off in the saloon last month. Said they were special ordered from a smith in Denver. The sheriff straightened, suddenly alert. Hargrove's been staying at the Mountain View Saloon on the north end of town. If we move now, we might catch them before they realize what they left behind. Yates stood, swaying slightly before steadying himself. I'm coming with you. No, you're not, Bethany said firmly, placing a hand on his chest. You've got a concussion at the very least, you'll only slow them down. For a moment she thought he would brush aside her concern, then he sighed and nodded. She's right, Sheriff, but those are my horses, bring them back. You have my word, Donovan promised. We'll gather a posse and move out within the hour. As the sheriff strode away, Yates slumped back onto the step. I hate not going, I know, Bethany said softly, sitting beside him, but you need rest, and I need you in one piece for our wedding. The mention of their upcoming nuptials seemed to focus him. The wedding, he repeated. Bethany, I don't know if we can. I mean, with everything destroyed. Yates Eldridge, she interrupted, if you're trying to back out of marrying me because you lost some horses and a barn, I'll never forgive you. The fierceness in her tone startled a laugh from him. No, madam, I wouldn't dare, but our start will be harder than I planned. Good things often require effort, she said, taking his hand. Now, let's get you inside and properly cleaned up, then we can start making lists of what needs to be done. Dawn was breaking by the time they had tended his wound, made coffee, and begun assessing the damage in daylight. It was every bit as devastating as it had seemed in the dark. The barn a total loss, fencing damaged, and precious feed stores destroyed. But the house stood intact, and about 2/3 of Yates's horses had either escaped the rustlers or been freed by him during the confrontation. They were reviewing options when the sound of hoofbeats drew their attention. Sheriff Donovan rode into the yard, followed by several men leading horses, including the distinctive chestnut form of Rusty. Yates was on his feet in an instant, moving to meet them. You found them, Donovan dismounted with a satisfied smile. Caught them dividing the spoils at an old line shack about 10 miles north. They didn't expect us so soon. And the men, Yates asked, checking Rusty for injuries. All 4 in custody, the sheriff confirmed, including Hargrove. They'll face trial next month when the circuit judge comes through. The relief on Yates's face was palpable. Thank you, Sheriff, I owe you. Just doing my job, Donovan replied modestly, though I wouldn't say no to a piece of wedding cake next week. Later, as they watched the posse ride away, Bethany slipped her arm around Yates's waist. Still think we should postpone the wedding? He looked down at her, his expression soft with love despite his exhaustion. Not a chance, though I should warn you our honeymoon might involve rebuilding a barn. Bethany laughed. There are worse ways to start a marriage. The next week passed in a blur of activity. The entire town rallied around them. Men arrived with lumber and tools to begin rebuilding the barn. Women brought food and supplies, and even Bethany's students pitched in, helping to clean up debris and sort salvageable items. Never seen anything like it, Yates marveled as he and Bethany watched a dozen men raise the barn's frame in a single day. In Boston, neighbors barely acknowledged each other. That's why we're here and not there, Bethany said, handing him a cup of coffee. Out here, people understand that survival depends on community. The day before their wedding, Bethany was putting the finishing touches on her dress, a simple white creation with lace at the collar and cuffs, when Mrs. Jenkins appeared at her door with an unexpected visitor. This gentleman is asking for you, the boarding house owner said, her expression puzzled. Says he's your brother. Bethany stared in shock at the tall man behind Mrs. Jenkins. Benjamin, her oldest brother, stepped forward, hat in hand, his familiar grin warming his handsome face. Hello, little Bethy. With a cry of delight, Bethany flung herself into his arms. What are you doing here? How did you find me? Benjamin Adams hugged her tightly, then held her at arm's length to look her over. Got your letter about the wedding. Did you really think I'd miss my only sister getting married? Tears sprang to Bethany's eyes. But Philadelphia is so far. Worth every mile, he assured her. Though I must say you've chosen quite the remote location to settle down. Took me 3 days just to get from Cheyenne to this little town. Bethany introduced her brother to Mrs. Jenkins, who promptly offered him a room and bustled off to prepare it, leaving the siblings alone. How are mother and father? Bethany asked, leading him to sit beside her. And the boys? All well, Benjamin assured her. Though Mother nearly had a fit when she read you were marrying a man you'd known for mere months. She wanted to come herself to inspect this cowboy who's stolen your heart, but Father convinced her the journey would be too arduous. And what about you? Bethany asked, suddenly anxious. Have you come to inspect Yates as well? Benjamin's expression grew serious. I've come to give you away, Bethy, but yes, I do intend to meet the man, after what happened with Robert. Bethany squeezed his hand. Yates is nothing like Robert, he knows about my condition. It doesn't matter to him. Her brother studied her face. You truly love him. With all my heart, she answered without hesitation. Benjamin nodded slowly. Then I look forward to meeting him, though I may have to put a bit of fear into him as your big brother. It's tradition, you know, Bethany laughed. He's faced down rustlers and lost everything he's built only to start again without complaint. I'm not sure you'll manage to intimidate him. Challenge accepted, Benjamin grinned. The meeting between Yates and Benjamin took place that evening at the rebuilt barn, where a small celebration marked the completion of the frame. Bethany watched nervously as the two men sized each other up. So you're the man who pulled my sister from a creek and then proceeded to sweep her off her feet, Benjamin said, shaking Yates's hand firmly. And you're the brother who taught her to swim but apparently not how to stay away from slippery creek banks, Yates returned with equal firmness. For a moment tension hung in the air, then both men broke into matching grins. I like him, Benjamin declared to Bethany. Thank heaven, she replied dryly. I was planning to marry him regardless. The three of them talked late into the night, Benjamin sharing stories of their childhood in Philadelphia, Yates recounting his journey west and his plans for the ranch, and Bethany basking in the unexpected joy of having her old family and new life intersect. When June 18th dawned, it brought clear blue skies and a gentle breeze, perfect weather for the garden wedding they had planned at the town square. Bethany dressed with Mrs. Jenkins's help, her simple gown complemented by wildflowers in her hair. You look radiant, Benjamin said when he came to escort her. I feel radiant, Bethany replied, taking his arm. Is it terribly vain to be this happy? Not at all, her brother assured her. You deserve every happiness, Bethy. The town square had been transformed. Rows of chairs faced an arch woven with more wildflowers, and it seemed every resident of Pinewood had turned out in their Sunday best. As Bethany and Benjamin rounded the corner, the crowd rose, and Bethany's gaze fixed on Yates standing beneath the arch. He wore a new black suit, his hair neatly combed, but it was his expression that caught her breath, a look of such profound love and wonder that tears sprang to her eyes. The ceremony itself was brief, but heartfelt. Reverend Taylor spoke of commitment and partnership, of weathering storms together and celebrating joys. When it came time for vows, Yates took Bethany's hands in his. Bethany Adams, he said, his voice steady and sure. I vow to love you through all seasons, to stand beside you in triumph and tragedy, to build a life worthy of the trust you've placed in me. You saved me from a loneliness I didn't even recognize until I met you. I promise to cherish every day we're given together. Bethany swallowed past the lump in her throat. Yates Eldridge, I vow to love you completely and without reservation, to face whatever comes with courage and faith, to make our house a true home filled with laughter and comfort. You've given me a future I never thought possible. I promise to walk beside you on whatever path life takes us. They exchanged rings, Bethany's diamond, and a simple gold band for Yates that Benjamin had thoughtfully brought from Philadelphia. And when Reverend Taylor pronounced them husband and wife, Yates's kiss was both gentle and fervent, a promise of all that was to come. The celebration lasted well into the evening. There was dancing and feasting, toasts and well wishes, and through it all, Bethany couldn't stop smiling. Even Mrs. Peterson, who had been among the most vocal about the hasty marriage, seemed won over. You two fit together, she told Bethany during a quiet moment. Like matching pieces of a puzzle. As twilight descended, Yates found his bride chatting with her brother. Mrs. Eldridge, he said, offering his arm. May I steal you away? Our home awaits. The ride to the ranch was magical, the path illuminated by moonlight. They had declined offers to be escorted with traditional noise and teasing, preferring to begin their married life in peace. When they reached the house, Yates surprised Bethany by sweeping her into his arms to carry her across the threshold. "Welcome home," he murmured against her hair. Inside, she found more surprises. While she'd been preparing for the wedding, Yates and his friends had been busy. New curtains hung at the windows, a colorful quilt adorned the bed, and fresh wildflowers stood in a pitcher on the table. "It's beautiful," she whispered, touching a finger to the quilt. "When did you have time?" "I had help," Yates admitted, slipping his arms around her waist from behind. Everyone wanted to contribute something. "The quilt is from the ladies' sewing circle, the curtains from Mrs. Jenkins." Bethany turned in his arms, overwhelmed by the generosity of her new community and the love in her husband's eyes. "I never imagined being this happy." "Nor I," Yates confessed, his forehead resting against hers. "When I left Boston, I thought I was running away. Now I realize I was running toward you all along." The summer passed in a haze of hard work and profound happiness. By day, they rebuilt what had been lost. A new barn rose, sturdier than the old, fences were repaired, and routines established. By night, they discovered each other as husband and wife, their love deepening with each passing day. Bethany continued teaching, finding that marriage enhanced rather than hindered her connection with her students. And Yates's business began to recover, his reputation for quality horses spreading beyond Pinewood. In late August, Yates returned from a trip to Cheyenne with news. "I've been offered a contract to supply horses for the territorial mail service," he announced over dinner. "It would mean security for the next 2 years at least." "Yates, that's wonderful," Bethany exclaimed. "This calls for a celebration." His expression grew thoughtful. "There's something else. While I was in town, I visited an orphanage run by the Sisters of Mercy." Bethany set down her fork, suddenly intent. "Oh, they have 20 children in need of homes," he continued carefully. "Some just babies, others already half-grown." I got to thinking. "Our house has empty rooms, our table has empty chairs." Hope bloomed in Bethany's chest, but she tempered it with caution. "Are you saying you want to adopt?" Yates reached across the table to take her hand. "I'm saying I want us to consider it. We have love to give, Bethany." "Maybe not in the traditional way, but—" "Yes," she interrupted, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Yes, I want that too." The smile that broke across his face was like sunshine. "I've already spoken to Reverend Taylor. He'll write a letter of recommendation. We could go back to Cheyenne next month to meet some of the children." That night, lying in her husband's arms, Bethany felt a peace she had never known before. The doctor's words that had once seemed a death sentence to her hopes now appeared merely as a detour on a different path to joy. "What are you thinking about?" Yates asked, stroking her hair. "How wrong I was," she murmured. "I thought being barren meant I could never be a mother, but motherhood isn't just about bearing children, is it?" Yates propped himself up on one elbow to look at her. "No, it isn't. It's about love and nurture and guidance." He traced her cheek with gentle fingers. "You know, you've been mothering this town since you arrived. Those students of yours, the Johnson twins who come to you with their problems, even old Mr. Miller who needs help writing letters to his daughter." Bethany hadn't thought of it that way. "I suppose I have been looking after them." "You've been mothering me too," Yates continued with a tender smile. "Patching me up after the fire, making sure I eat properly, loving me through my stubborn moods." She laughed softly. "That's not mothering, that's being a wife." "It's both," he insisted. "You have so much love to give, Bethany, more than enough for me, for this town, and for whatever children find their way to our home." His words filled a void she hadn't realized still existed in her heart. "Thank you," she whispered, pressing her lips to his, "for seeing me whole when I thought I was broken." Their journey to the orphanage in Cheyenne the following month was a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. The building itself was austere but clean, and Sister Mary Agnes, who greeted them, had kind eyes and a no-nonsense face. "Reverend Taylor speaks highly of you both," she said, leading them through corridors where children peeked curiously from doorways. "He says you have a gift for teaching, Mrs. Eldridge, and that you, Mr. Eldridge, have built a solid home and business. We have room in both for children who need it," Yates confirmed. Sister Mary Agnes nodded approvingly. "We have several children I believe might benefit from your home. However, I should warn you about two siblings, Emma and Daniel Harper. They've been with us for 3 months since their parents died of fever. Emma is 6, Daniel just 4. They're sweet children, but they've refused to be separated, which makes placement difficult." Bethany and Yates exchanged a look of perfect understanding. "We would never separate siblings," Bethany assured the nun. "Then perhaps you'd like to meet them first?" Emma and Daniel sat in a small playroom, the girl reading haltingly from a primer while her brother played with wooden blocks. Both looked up when Sister Mary Agnes entered with the visitors. "Emma, Daniel, this is Mr. and Mrs. Eldridge," the nun introduced them. "They've come from Pinewood to meet you." Emma immediately shifted closer to her brother, a protective arm around his shoulders. "We stay together," she said firmly, her chin lifted in a show of courage that belied her small stature. Bethany knelt to be at eye level with the children. "Of course you do," she said gently. "Family should always stay together. My husband and I understand that completely." Some of the wariness eased from Emma's expression. "You do?" "We do," Yates confirmed, crouching beside his wife. "In fact, we have a house with a room that would be perfect for a brother and sister to share. And we have horses, real horses," Daniel interrupted, speaking for the first time. Yates smiled. "Real horses, including one gentle pony who's just the right size for learning to ride." The boy's eyes widened. "I never rided a horse before." "Ridden," Emma corrected automatically, then blushed. "That's right," Bethany said warmly. "You're good with words, Emma." "I'm a teacher, you know," the girl's interest visibly piqued. "A real teacher, with a school and everything." "A real school," Bethany confirmed. "With 28 students who would be very happy to meet you both." By the end of the visit, it was clear to everyone that a match had been made. There would be paperwork and a required visit from Sister Mary Agnes to inspect their home, but barring unexpected problems, Emma and Daniel would become Eldridges by Christmas. As they prepared to leave, Emma surprised Bethany by slipping her small hand into the woman's larger one. "Will you be our new mother?" she asked hesitantly, emotion welled in Bethany's throat. "If you would like me to be," she managed. The child nodded solemnly. "I think I would. I've been trying to be Daniel's mother, but I'm not very good at it yet." "Oh, sweetheart," Bethany knelt and gathered the girl into a gentle embrace. "You've been wonderful. But now you can just be his big sister, and I'll help with the mother part." Over Emma's head, Bethany's eyes met Yates's, and the love and promise she saw there made her heart full to bursting. The day the children came home for that was how they all thought of it. As coming home rather than moving to a new place, the entire town turned out to welcome them. A hand-painted sign hung over the main street reading "Welcome Emma and Daniel Eldridge," and Mrs. Jenkins had baked a cake decorated with small sugar horses. "I never seen so many people," Daniel whispered, clinging to Yates's hand as they walked from the stage coach to their waiting wagon. "Saw," Emma corrected, though she too looked overwhelmed by the attention. Bethany squeezed her shoulder reassuringly. "They're all excited to meet you, but we don't have to stay long if you're tired from the journey." The children had settled in remarkably well over the following weeks. There were adjustments, of course nightmares that needed soothing, rules to establish, and the occasional misunderstanding. But there was also laughter that filled rooms previously too quiet, small boots beside larger ones by the door, and bedtime stories that became everyone's favorite part of the day. On Christmas Eve, with a light snow falling outside and the children finally asleep after much excitement about the coming morning, Bethany and Yates sat before the fire in contented silence. "Happy?" Yates asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Beyond words," Bethany replied honestly. "I never thought, after the doctor told me." Life has a way of surprising us, Yates said, pressing a kiss to her temple. Bethany turned to face him, needing to express what was in her heart. When I left Philadelphia, I thought I was running from pity and judgment. I thought I was accepting a life alone, but you've given me so much more than I ever dreamed possible. We've given each other a family, Yates corrected gently. Different from what either of us imagined, perhaps, but perfect in its own way. Perfect, she agreed, resting her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing Pinewood in pristine white. Inside the Eldridge home, love warmed every corner, proving that family was indeed where you found it, and motherhood came in many forms, all of them valid, all of them beautiful. The following spring, as wildflowers once again carpeted the Wyoming plains, Bethany found herself in a familiar position standing before her class, teaching. But now, when she looked out at the eager and some not-so-eager faces, she saw Emma among them, her hand perpetually raised to answer questions. And when school let out each day, Daniel waited on the steps, usually in animated conversation with Yates, who had taken to timing his trips to town with the end of the school day. Life had fallen into a rhythm that felt at once miraculous and utterly natural. The ranch was prospering, the contract with the mail service proving even more lucrative than anticipated. The barn was fully rebuilt, better than before, and now housed twice as many horses. One sunny afternoon in May, almost exactly a year after Bethany had tumbled into Pine Creek, she sat on a blanket near the creek's edge, watching Daniel and Emma splash in a shallow, safe portion while Yates kept a watchful eye from nearby. "Careful there, Danny," he called as the boy ventured towards slightly deeper water. "Stay where your feet can touch." "I will, Pa," Daniel called back, the term of endearment now coming naturally to his lips. Bethany smiled, still marveling at how quickly the children had adapted to calling them Mother and Pa. It had happened organically, first Daniel, who had been too young to remember much of his birth parents, then Emma, who had approached the matter with her characteristic thoughtfulness. "Is it all right if I call you Mother?" she had asked Bethany one night during their bedtime routine. "I remember my first mother, but I think she would want me to have a new one to love me now." "I think she would," Bethany had agreed, tears threatening, "and I would be honored." Now, watching her family play in the spring sunshine, Bethany felt a contentment so deep it was almost overwhelming. When Yates joined her on the blanket, dropping a kiss on her upturned face, she leaned against his solid presence with a sigh of pure happiness. "What are you thinking, Mrs. Eldridge?" he asked, his arm slipping around her waist. "I'm thinking about how wrong everyone was," she replied. "The doctor who said I'd never be a mother, Robert who couldn't see beyond biology, all the pitying looks and whispers." Yates nodded, understanding. "And look at you now, mother to two beautiful children, teacher to dozens more, heart of our home. And you," she added, meeting his gaze, "the man who saw me whole from the beginning." He smiled, the skin around his eyes crinkling in the way she loved. "I only spoke the truth that day. Do you remember? When you were worried about not being able to have children, and I told you that I already mother you," she finished, recalling the conversation that had helped heal a wound she'd thought would always be raw. "Taking care of you when you're hurt, making sure you eat properly. Loving me through my stubborn moods," he added with a grin. "Though I maintain I have very few of those," Bethany laughed. "Very few," she agreed diplomatically. Yates's expression grew more serious. "I meant it then, and I mean it even more now. Motherhood isn't just about bearing children. It's about nurturing, guiding, loving. And you, Bethany Eldridge, are the most nurturing person I've ever known." "Pa, Mother, look!" Daniel's excited shout interrupted them. The boy was holding up a small, wriggling fish he'd somehow managed to catch with his bare hands. "Well done." Yates called back, "Bring it here and I'll show you how to return it safely to the water." As Daniel carefully made his way toward them, his prize clutched gently between small hands, with Emma following close behind offering instructions. Bethany felt her heart might burst with love for this family that had come together in ways she could never have predicted. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "I think I might write to Robert." Yates raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Your former fiancé, whatever for, to thank him," Bethany said simply. "If he hadn't broken our engagement, I would never have come west, never have met you. Never have found Emma and Daniel. Never have fallen into Pine Creek," Yates added with a twinkle in his eye. "That too," she laughed. "Everything that seemed like an ending turned out to be a beginning. Even being barren, what I thought was the worst possible fate led me here, to this perfect moment." Yates pressed his lips to her temple. "To many more perfect moments," he murmured. "Many more," she agreed, rising to meet her children as they ran toward her, wet and laughing in the spring sunshine, their future stretching before them like the vast Wyoming sky, limitless with possibility.